Welcome, friends. We are your hosts, Sandy and Wade, baby best friends turned husband and wife and business partners.
This podcast is for the dreamers, the movers and shakers, and those who seek to attract their dream life.
Strap in. Getting magnetic in 3, 2, 1.
Like attracts like. If you see it in your mind, you can hold it in your hand. You just decide what it's going to be, who you're going to be, how you're going to do it. And then from that point, the universe is going to get out your way.
This moment in time, this is your time to rise.
What is up, my people? Happy Wednesday. Welcome to Getting Magnetic. We are super excited for today's episode and today's guest. If you tuned in on Friday, we had a quick money mindset episode, kind of how to set a foundation for a proper mindset around money. From here, we're starting a 3-part series, which we're calling our money series. And we're going to interview what we call our financial SWAT team. And today we had to start out with the GOAT, like how you start out, how you start thinking about your money, managing your money, growing your money. For us has been hire someone who knows what they're doing. You know, we might know how to make money, but then how do you manage money? How do you, file your taxes? How do you do all these things? How do you set your businesses up to be as efficient as possible? So we're bringing on Greg O'Brien, founder and CEO of GO CPA. And I have known Greg since college. We actually played football together at Bentley University. We built a relationship. We both lived in Boston. And we've been able to partner in business together. I respect Greg as just a human being. He's a rad human being, but he also has a great, brilliant business mind. He's a former employee turned entrepreneur. So we had to have him on, share a bit about his story. But what he has done over the past 2 years in launching his own business, really redefining the game for CPA firms. When you think about a CPA, you think about, your parents' 60-year-old CPA pushing pens and counting, beans at a desk, right? Sorry to any CPAs out there. Greg is redefining the game. Like, he is that new, hip, young, like not too young, but on the younger side, like redefining, like stylish, like CPA that's like really shaking up the industry, doing it the way, he wants to do it, getting magnetic to that life and that business he wants. And I'm just so impressed in what he's done in such a short time. And he adds so much value to our lives as a friend, as a person we know, in the relationship we have with him, but also, through business, through being our CPA, through kind of overseeing, being a part of our financial SWAT team. So without further ado, we wanted to invite Greg O'Brien on. Say what up to the Getting Magnetic fam, Greg.
Sandy, Wade, great to be here. I appreciate you having me, and looking forward to this conversation and seeing what kind of value we can add to your audience.
Welcome. Okay, let's set the foundation. Like, tell us a little bit about Greg. I want people to get to know you. Like, I'm going to bring the feeling to this interview. So set the foundation. Like, where were you born and raised? Like, tell us a little about you and your upbringing so that people can get to know you.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm an East Coast boy. So born and raised in Boston, Mass. That's where I met Wade back in the day. So, grew up kind of traditional in a suburb of Boston. Went to high school, started playing football in high school, and then eventually went to Bentley University, which is a small Division II school outside of Boston. That's where I met Wade. We played football together there. So obviously neither of us made it to the league, although Wade probably thought he should have. From there, I obviously had a great time, great education in college, and then just kind of took the traditional route. I did study accounting in college, and then I, for some reason, stayed and got my master's degree in taxation, which is, looking back, a bizarre, move in my life. When you're 22 years old, not many people are thinking about getting a master's degree in taxation, but something intrigued me about it at the time. I don't really remember what it was, but got through that, got my my CPA license, and then along the way, just worked at a traditional CPA firm in Boston, and then eventually, kind of got the grass is greener syndrome that a lot of people get in their career and they're young, and flipped over and got into real estate. And I was working for a couple different private real estate developers around the Boston area. Really, really valuable and interesting experience in my life. And it's led me to do certain other things in my life now. And it's also, given me great depth of knowledge for clients and how real estate really works. So I don't regret that move whatsoever. But as things grew on, I ended up at a larger real estate company, which was a great company to work for. But at that point in my life, 2017, I started doing a lot more self education. As Wade probably knows, I'm a huge, huge podcast listener. So I started listening to a lot of podcasts, a lot of motivational podcasts. You think like Tony Robbins type podcasts. Just kind of at that stage of my life, for discovering what was out there, what else I could be doing, and kind of felt a little stuck, honestly, where I was in my career. Had a good job, but I kind of said, "Geez, like I'm never going to get the top of this company. It's 19 more levels of management to get through."
Mhm.
And along the way, what I had been doing is just helping family and friends with their taxes. Right, I'm a CPA, have a master's in tax, so people would say, "Hey, can you do our tax return for us? We have this question or money question, stuff like that." And I'd say, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And just kind of started off as a straight side hustle, and then I was like, "Hey, this isn't bad. Making some extra money during the winter. Working, just doing a couple hours at night and on Saturdays and Sundays, spending a few hours." And I liked it. And that really gave me that entrepreneurial bug. And, I'll never forget, I had a meeting with a younger CPA that had gone out on his own and was doing pretty well. And I kind of told him what I was feeling. And he said to me, he said, "Greg, you're screwed." I said, "What do you mean I'm screwed?" He's like, "You're screwed." I go, I don't get what you mean." He said, "If you have those feelings right now," he's like, "there's no going back." He's like, you are going to be an entrepreneur. You're gonna quit your job." He's like, I can just tell how you're talking. And he was right. So about 6 months later from that conversation, I really, really focused and studied on the industry, the problems with the industry, the goods, the bads, and how to break into it. Because, I'm an analytical person, right? I'm a CPA, I'm a numbers person. So it wasn't, the leap of faith was there, but I also wanted to be analytical about it, right? Like, hey, I live in downtown Boston, I have bills to pay. So I had to figure that part of it out. And then I just kind of picked the date. I said, no later than September this year, I'm going to leave my job. And then just woke up one day and I said, today's the day. Went in, I quit. And it was terrifying, but at the same time, it was, one of the most exciting days of my life. And, my parents probably thought I was crazy at the time. A lot of people thought I was crazy, but, that was only a little over about 2.5 years ago at this point. Not even, probably less than that. And haven't looked back since. So went into business in 2018. And my whole theory was that, I think that I worked at a firm that was old school. I see a lot of these old school firms out there that are very paper oriented, very slow, not very tech oriented, not good customer service. And I said, I think we can approach this industry with more of like a tech company mindset and kind of put it on its head. And, thus I decided from day one, I said, I'm going to grow a team completely virtually, not going to have a, big office footprint. We're going to find the best talent wherever they may be, whether they're, in Massachusetts or they're in Arizona. I'm going to hire them based on their credentials. So, pre-COVID, we were doing the whole virtual thing anyway. So it's been no big deal for us. But yeah, so the journey's been great so far. We've been able to help, countless entrepreneurs, startups, small business owners, founders in their journey, their financial journey, both from a personal standpoint and a business standpoint. And it's truly gratifying, when you see, someone have tangible results in the form of, of reduced taxes that they can use that money elsewhere in their life, whether it's for their family or to reinvest in their business. So it's been a great journey so far. Feels like it's been about 10 years, but obviously we're not that far. And I'm a huge student of the game. So I'm out there, I'm learning, I'm learning, I'm learning. I'm listening to 15 to 20 podcasts a week, probably. I just feel like there's so much
Love it.
great content out there right now that we have for free. And my theory is, right, like, hey, I want to do things differently, but I don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? Because there's a lot of people doing a lot of cool things out there that are pretty successful. So if you can take a little bit of everybody, it makes all the difference. And I look at how this business has been formed and how we run it, and I feel like it's like we chip a little bit off of a different businesses along the way and kind of mold it, to our own liking.
So much to unwrap there in the journey into entrepreneurship, and then the mindset of like that student of the game, always learning, always looking to grow, and then kind of zigging while people zag. We'll unwrap that through the episode. Before we even get into that, because I've had the privilege of knowing you, in college, playing football together, and I want you, because I see this in you, and I want you to speak on for people out there because I think it can empower people. But you came in to Bentley you walked on, you were undersized for a linebacker. So Greg was our middle linebacker. He ended up being the captain of the team, like the one of the handful of leaders on the team who was chosen as a captain. And he went from, undersized as a walk-on to starting captain, middle linebacker, kind of the quarterback of the defense. So kind of you had that kind of underdog chip on your shoulder mentality. How has that served you in your life, but also in your business?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's definitely a big part of my story and my journey, right? And I think like looking back on those days, it goes down to work ethic. I'm a big believer in there's no shortcuts. You can't substitute for hard work. You can't substitute for studying. Again, I wasn't the most physically talented player out there, but one thing I prided myself on from some good coaching was the mental aspect of the game, right? And I was one of those people that I truly believed like I knew the play that was going to come because we studied all week. So that was my way around it, right? Like, hey, I got to make up for some not being the biggest guy out there, not being the fastest guy out there. How do I make up for that? And there's a whole nother, you're half physical, half mental, right? So I said that's the way to make up for it. So yeah, that's been a huge kind of part of my journey, and I brought it to the business world as well, right? And I think that I'm not, we're not PwC, but at the same time, or yeah, obviously, no offense to them, they're a $41 billion company, but I also don't, I don't compete with them. I don't want to compete with them, right? Because I don't want to do what they're doing. And I look at it, I don't approach it as David versus Goliath, right? I just say, hey, look, I got to make my own way here. I see opportunities in this industry, and yeah, we're starting from zero. We're starting from the ground up in 2018, but I truly in my heart believe that there's a mission out there to help people, to help startups, to help entrepreneurs do things differently. I see the vision. I see the path, right? And then it's that mentality of like nothing's going to stop me. Of course, there's going to be multiple roadblocks, hurdles, people pushing back, stumbles along the way, but that's just all part of the journey. And I love it. I had a stumble this week internally, and I was like, you know what? This could really put me down for 2 days, but otherwise, or I can just look at it as, hey, this is a stumbling block along the way. Let's read, react, and figure it out. So yeah, certainly I take that mindset from the field, and have tried my best to to put it into business.
Love it.
So good. Okay, so before we dive into like the foundational blocks of, I guess, being a CPA and taxes and all these things that are way over my head, and why I'm so grateful for you, because I could absolutely never thrive in your industry. I want to know, what was like the defining moment? Like, I know you said you had that conversation with that younger CPA that was like, game over, like you're going to be an entrepreneur. But was there like, I don't know, like some people are driven by pain, right? For me, like that's how I'm driven. Like I am motivated by, I don't want to experience XYZ. So I work really hard to avoid the pain. Like there's this whole mentality of like, do you operate pleasure versus pain? So I'm curious, did something like painful happen to you, or did some sort of event, like what was that defining moment that was like, I am leaving my job and I am starting my own thing?
Yeah, I think I think I'm more of like the pleasure aspect of that conversation, where I said, of course, there's obviously financial motive to what people do. I was more of like the freedom seeker too, where I said, look, I have a cushy, they call it a cushy corporate job, right? Like working the 9 to 5, like didn't have to put in much extra time, but I wasn't fulfilled. And that's what I sought. I sought fulfillment. And I said, of course I want to be, more successful financially. And I want to control my own life. And I think that was one of the bigger things, right? Like I want to have control, and I want to be a part of building something. And I missed that. Like I missed the competitive edge too from the field, right? Like you're always competing, and then you're in this corporate world. And I was like, yeah, it just it just kind of like you're going through. I said, I can't see myself doing this for the next 30 years, right? And I know that there's a whole generation of people that was the big thing. You work at a company for 30, 40 years, and you get your pension, your retirement plan, you move on. But I did 6, 7 years of that, and I wasn't fulfilled through it. So it was definitely a slower journey. I didn't have like a cliff moment. It was just really self discovery. And then I also think it was opening my eyes to what was out there, right? Like would have at one point said, I have no idea how to start a business. That's crazy. That'll never happen. You need a lot of money to do that. But through my self education journey, listening to podcasts, things like that, I was like, this is possible. And I listened to a lot of Tony Robbins, and he can fire you up. And one of the things that I did that got me over my stumbling block of making the decision was I wrote down what is the worst thing that could happen? And I said, the worst thing that could happen is that I fail miserably, I run out of money, and I got to move home with my parents, and then I'm still a CPA, and I go get a corporate job, and probably just end up 2 years behind where I was. And I was like, that's not the worst thing in the world. So I had to do things like that to get over that fear, because it's certainly a fear, right? Like, but it's also super exciting once you make that leap, and having that mindset of I'm gonna succeed, and there's no stopping me. So that's kind of the mindset I had to approach it with. And once I get over that mental fear of, what's the worst thing that could happen type of thing, it was kind of all systems go from there.
I love it. Well, school's never out for the pro. You're a constant student. I love that about you. So cool.
Yeah, well,
Get
I
into
think
this?
I resonate with Greg so much because we actually did take a similar course. I mean, as much as we went to the same school, we both got our master's degree, mine in finance, his in tax from there, and then went into those respective fields. But 7 years in, we actually have a similar timeline too. It's like, gosh, there's more out there for me. And I love what Greg said, and I want to like unbox that a bit. But a few things that I picked up in him telling his story is, one, like Sandy said, school's never out for the pro. He was always learning. He was seeking to personally develop himself. And maybe not at the beginning of his career. Maybe you're doing the development and learning the skills, learning the industry, learning the business world in general. But from there, when you start to have that like yearn for more, like something is placed on your heart, it's there for a reason. Those gut instincts, that intuitive feeling where it's like, I feel like I could do this. From there, he surrounded himself with mentors. He doesn't necessarily have access to Tony Robbins personally, but he started listening to his stuff, and a lot more than Tony Robbins. He started listening to a lot of different people, educating himself on his industry, mastering his craft, and then started to think, okay, I'm seeking freedom. I'm seeking all these things. I'm not going to become the CEO of this company for decades. But what if I could become the CEO of my own life overnight through becoming an entrepreneur, through building something from a skill set I have or a desire or a passion I have, and then setting a date. So he made a declaration to himself. He set a date as of September 2018, I'm going to make the jump. And then one day waking up and just deciding to do it. I remember Greg called me after he did it, and I just had this hunch, and I said, did you just quit your job? And he goes, yup, let's go. I'm starting.
Funny story there. So at the time, my boss I worked kind of remotely in a satellite office. He was down in Washington D.C. and it was just a random Thursday, and I obviously I couldn't do it in person. I had to call the guy, so I called him and picked up the phone. He said, "What's up, Greg?" And I just shocked. I went into shock. I would silence. I couldn't speak. And he's like, "Are you there?" I said, "Call me back," and I just hung up. And then I was like, "All right, I gotta compose my thoughts here," because in my head I said, I had quit jobs before. I had quit 2 previous jobs. No one likes quitting jobs. It's just like tough. It's awkward. But at this point, I was like, I'm quitting a job forever. There's no going back, and he's gonna think I'm crazy probably. And it was all those fears, and it was interesting. His reaction was silence, and then it was, I completely respect that. And my wife's going through the same journey right now, and I think that's awesome. And it was like the coolest thing to have someone that you're putting in potentially a bad position, right? To completely respect what you're doing. And he actually really, really helped me through that process. So that was just, I remember that day like it was yesterday. I really do. It was just looking back on that now, I laugh about it, but that's how it all went down.
I love it. I love the story. Yeah, it's so good. And I also love what you brought up in thinking about, in maybe journaling on, or just really spending time thinking about what is the worst case scenario that can happen. I think for any decision in your life where you're like thinking about it and it might be a bigger decision, you want to do it, journal on that, meditate on it, think about that. Like, what is the worst thing that can happen? If you have a desire to jump into entrepreneurship, spend some time with that thought, with that question, because it's really not that bad. So go for it. Sometimes you just need to take the jump, and then Greg takes the leap and the jump, and I will commend you, and I'm going to humble brag for you a bit. In 2 years, what he's been able to build, with his firm, whether it's employing other people and impacting their lives and other families, but also helping numerous businesses like build and grow. And what you've been able to do has been amazing. So let's flip the script. Let's transition into, okay, typically when someone thinks about a CPA, I kind of mentioned this in the intro, maybe an older person, usually an older guy, gonna do your taxes at the end of the year, gonna maybe save you money, gonna say like, oh, let's not talk about this, whatever. But what you've taught me as a CPA, you've kind of been a mentor in money and financials and, on our financial SWAT team. You've helped really flip the script for me around the mindset around money. So if you could give people out there any advice around like how to think about money, how to think about taxes or CPA or what you do, like what would that be? What would your advice be?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, like, what do we do on a daily basis? Like, what does a CPA firm do? So, a variety of things, but what we really focus on are a few things. So one is really what we call tax planning. Now, that is a unique kind of thing that a lot of CPAs don't do, where we want to look at a client, mostly business owners, right? And that can be an entrepreneur that just by themselves too. That's a business, and we want to look at what are they paying in taxes right now, and then using the 80,000 page tax code that's out there right now, what can we do to flip that upside down and save them material sums of money, right? It is very difficult to do that stuff because it's very nuanced, it can be dry, but we have really focused on learning that stuff because that is where we see the most ROI for our clients. So what we have done differently than a lot of traditional CPAs is, your traditional CPA is someone that you've gone to probably once a year. They file your tax return. They tell you how much you owe or how much you're getting in a refund. And then if you're a business, there's more compliance stuff they do there. And when I looked at that, I said, there's no value there, right? That's just reporting. It's a report card, reporting history. So I said, well, what if we, go out there and we actually actively work with them throughout the year proactively to reduce what that report is going to say at the end of the year, right? If your tax return says you owe 100 or you have paid $100,000 in taxes, well, why don't we change that, right? And not just say, oh, well, and move on. And that's how a lot of people have operated over the years. And that just goes into the broken business model of CPA firms been operating for 100 years. And I'm not the first person to do tax planning. There's a great group out there called the American Institute of Certified Tax Planners. So I discovered them probably a month or two into my journey. Once I went on my own, I said, this is interesting. It was really expensive investment, but that's something I believe in too, right? Investing yourself through coaching and through mentorship and through programs like that. And I said, okay, you know what do I have to lose? This seems interesting. It seems different. So I flew out to San Diego, did a week training with this group, very niche stuff. And it just like blew my mind. I'm like, you can do all this stuff. Like, I never learned this in school. I didn't learn this in my exams. And from that point on, it really changed how I thought about my business. So we take a very proactive approach after I went through that into working with businesses and their owners to drastically change their tax situation. And if we can get you to a quote unquote tax free life, we're going to try our best to get there. It's not always possible, but it is possible. I mean, people oftentimes might get upset about the news with, people not paying taxes, legally, but the government has set up the tax code as a list of incentives for people, mainly for two groups. That's a business owner and that's a real estate investor. And it's multiple reasons they do that, but because they're indirectly paying a lot of taxes through hiring people, through developing property and whatnot. So I took this mindset very early on. Said, okay, let's stop looking at this as a rule based thing. Of course, there are rules and laws you have to follow, but there are a ton of incentives in there, and people just overlook them. So that's been the core of our business. That's been our engine. That's what keeps us running. Now, the second half is we also do a robust, what we call virtual accounting and CFO service. So that's for a larger business that's operating as employees. So we're handling all their accounting, making sure their numbers are correct. And then we're doing more proactive things like cash flow planning, cash planning, budgeting, things like that. So, they know how much cash they're going to have on hand to make that decision to hire. So that's probably 50% of our business. And the other half is just tax planning. So definitely not a traditional model that we use, but it's really something that we've had success with, and I think it's the future of this industry.
I love it.
I love that you have changed the script on how people think of CPA. Like, I literally remember for years, like, going in with a manila folder to meet with my CPA. And it was like the tax meeting, and it's like on your calendar, and it's like you have to meet in person for some reason. Why is that a thing? Like,
That whole thing there, like, I always had a problem with that, and I said, like, well, I mean, this is 2020, 2018, whatever year it was. I'm like, why do we have to meet in person to like exchange documents? I'm like, let's have a secure portal and upload the documents. So again, it's just like a weird thing that the industry hasn't evolved. And still to this day, I have colleagues out there in the CPA industry that really struggled with COVID because they had to do everything in person. It was all document drop off. It was all in person stuff. And I was like, you got to get with the times here. Like things are changing,
Hmm.
and it's either get on the bus or you're gonna get left behind. So yeah, it's an older industry in terms of processes, which leads to opportunity for younger people out there that want to get into this. I mean, there isn't a ton of sub 40-year-old CPA firm owners out there in the grand scheme of things. Of course, there's many of them, but the grand numbers is not a lot of them. And that's because the traditional model of a CPA firm has burnt people out, and they've just been like, screw this, I'm not doing this the rest of my life. So yeah, it's an industry that I see so much opportunity in because there's so many things that can be fixed and improved upon. And I've definitely had people say like, well, you can't do it that way. And like, well, why not? Like, a good example of that is, a traditional CPA or a lawyer, they operate and they bill by the hour. And then, okay, I was intrigued by that. I said, well, what is my quote unquote hourly rate? And then I was like, well, that just seems like a made up number, like, 500 an hour, 100 an hour, 1,000 an hour. Like it just seems so arbitrary. And I looked into the history of it, and it really just came from a guy. He actually was from Massachusetts in the 1800s, just developed it as a method to charge his clients as a lawyer. And like, it was just a made up thing. And I'm like, I don't like that. So, I went into a different model of billing that's more value based of how much value we bring to you is how much you're going to pay us. And again, people would say, you can't do that. And it's like, well, why can't you do that? Right. There's no laws against that. And the answer would always like, well, that's not how you do it. That's not what CPAs do. So I just felt early on it was an industry that was very broken and that needs change, and change is coming. I know that because there's a lot of people that are innovating out there. I network and learn with the best out there, and you know that's my philosophy here. Is you got to get with the times because things are changing.
I think there's an entrepreneurship lesson there is, Greg studied the industry and studied competitors. And I think as an entrepreneur, you know, especially if you're going in to do similar services, you study your competition. You don't aim to compete with them. You aim to like, everyone's zigging, I'm gonna zag. You aim to do something different. You aim to, flip the industry on its head or add some different unique value proposition to the industry. So you study your competitors and go in a separate direction. So I love that kind of method and approach you've had. And really then from there also helping people understand and develop and build a mindset where I think you don't just work with clients and reduce taxes for them, but you work with them on building their mindset on flipping the script of, okay, taxes aren't necessarily just this expense that you pay once a year. Like, let's look at the tax code. Let's flip it. Let's look at it as a list of incentives. And then also, you've done the same with having a CPA. It's not just an expense like, oh, I have an expense. I have to pay my CPA. They're going to do my taxes once a year. No, it's an investment. You mentioned ROI, return on investment. If anyone who provides you a service, they should provide more value than they cost. So that becomes an investment where you invest in a good CPA. They get, your money, your business set up right, your taxes set up right. So you are then saving or earning more than they cost. And that becomes an investment. And so I think, especially as you grow as an entrepreneur or in your income or in your finances, investing in a CPA is huge. I think for you, when does that make sense? So a lot of our listeners are business owners, small business owners. First, actually answer for me, flipping this tax code on its head as a list of incentives. What are a few incentives like to have efficient taxes or save on taxes? Like, what are some high level things we should be doing?
Yeah, and certainly. So I think when you said like who should be working with a CPA, so there's not a one size fits all answer. I mean, generally speaking, if you're just an employee of a company W-2 and you're not really active in real estate or stock market investing, it's probably something that the software these days is pretty good that you could do yourself. And because the incentives out there for W-2 employees are not that good. And it's not a right or wrong answer. That's a policy question, right? That's not what the government is focused on of trying to incentivize. So that is what it is. Now, when you get into owning a small business, and that can be a side hustle, a startup. If you're doing doing a side hustle, just hey, I'm working, but I'm trying to build this thing on the side. I think at that point, if I were in that position, I would really, really study as best I can of what you can do because there's a lot of good free resources out there. Because again, you don't if you're only making a few $1,000s, you don't want to be spending it back on, trying to find a CPA. It's going to help you, but like it may not, be worth it from that volume standpoint. But certainly as you start growing and this is your full-time gig, like, hey, I'm running this small business, I'm running this I'm an entrepreneur doing things full time. At the very least, it's worth the conversation to see what they can help you and how or if they can help you. So I think it doesn't hurt to talk to them. Again, people like me, most CPAs are not gonna charge you to talk to them one time. Just say, hey, is there anything we should be doing, thinking about, right? And maybe we don't need to work together for another year or two, but just to get your mind right there is important. As far as what everyone should be doing, well, first off, I think that if everyone needs to, especially if you are a business, right? You gotta parse things out. The one of the biggest mistakes I've seen over the years is people that start a business and things happen fast, and they're kind of just mingling their life and personal stuff with business, and it's like, oh, it's all one and the same. What happens over time is that there is more compliance burden, and things can go wrong if that happens. But you also miss a lot, right? You miss a lot of things you could have been doing as far as legitimate legal deductions for your business, and that can get frustrating, right? Because you don't have that stuff tracked properly. So definitely get like your records in order. It doesn't have to be QuickBooks, but it can be a simple spreadsheet that you're tracking things on just to start. The next thing, really everybody, they should be thinking about forming an entity when they get to a point where it's a full-time type of activity, for two reasons. One, you want to have protection, right? You want to have protection against creditors, debtors, lawsuits, things like that. And if you have assets, whether it's intellectual property or it's physical assets in the business, you definitely want to have that protected. That's number one. Number two, that's where we can start doing different things with the tax code, right? To decide what type of entity makes sense for your situation, because the tax rates vary per entity or depending how that character of that income that flows to you. So, and as Wade knows, sometimes it makes sense to have multiple entities, right? So that's always step one in the tax planning journey is evaluating how the business is set up legally. Should it be changed? Should it be added to, subtracted from? So that's number one. And then the other thing is I think there are a lot of, without getting into the nitty gritty, there's a lot of incentive based tax credits out there that they've been around for a long time, but people overlook them all the time. And they're there for the taking, but you need to have someone that specializes and knows that stuff, right? To what to look for. There's people that are in either a product industry, or maybe there could be even in type of engineering, or they could be in tech, or they could be in some type of startup atmosphere. There's great art, research and development incentives out there, right? Like we have clients that will never pay taxes because of these research and development incentives, and they oftentimes come in and they didn't know about that for 5 years. So it has been there since 1986, but like again, it's very niche and specialized. So that's why it doesn't hurt to have your situation reviewed, by a CPA that's willing to talk to you.
So, quick question. When you talked about an entity, just to break it down, like that makes sense to us now because we've been doing this for a few years. But if I was a new listener and not really totally clear on that, that's talking about like creating an LLC or something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if you just, walk outside and go sell lemonade, like you're a business, but you don't need a formal, legal entity behind that. When you become something that's material and that, you have some serious skin in the game, that's when it makes sense to look at forming an entity. An entity could be a limited liability company, it could be a partnership, it could be a corporation, an S corporation, a limited liability LLP. The LP is all sorts of entity types out there. That's what your tax and legal team should help you with. But I tell people all the time, like if they're at day one and they haven't even proved their concept yet, take a little time, think about it, start trying to generate some income, some sales, and then we can get the protection, the entity, the tax stuff in place. It's good to be set up early, but you don't need to jump the gun. Yeah. I'm always a big believer of like, let's make sure, what you're doing, this is what you want to be doing, and you have a path to growth.
So what I heard in kind of your message to business owners, and for all you out there to put into layman's terms, first, get your records straight. So what we've done is, maybe you get a business checking account or an account that your income goes into, And maybe you have a debit card where you put your business expenses on it. Maybe you open up a separate credit card where you put your business expenses on it. Something where it's separate from your personal life, so you can start to track your business, because what you track grows. When you start understanding your inflows of cash, your outflows of cash, you can start to grow and study it, and you eventually work with someone else to do that too. Set up an entity. So when you start to grow it enough where it becomes a full-time thing, or it produces enough income, you protect it through what, Greg and Sandy mentioned, whether it's an LLC, an S corp, a partnership, different things, because there's protection there, but there's also efficiencies there from a tax perspective. And then 3, start to work with someone. You don't want to know everything about an 18 whatever thousand page tax code. Like, that's why you hire a professional.
Yeah.
88,000 page tax code. Like, you don't know a lot. And guess what? Filling out something online through TurboTax, like, isn't going to be everything either. So you start to work with a professional, someone like GO CPA, someone like just a CPA, to start to understand, okay, how can I make this more efficient? How can I grow? Beyond that, I love putting it into story. And, people might have heard this before a few years ago or years ago. Warren Buffett kind of came out publicly and was like, I pay less percentage in taxes than my secretary does. And then starting to understand, why is that? Because at first it's like, oh my gosh, this billionaire pays a lower percentage in taxes than his secretary. That is so unfair. But going back to what Greg said, you start to flip your mindset to, this whole tax code wasn't written as like to penalize people to pay taxes. It was like, hey, if you do this, here's a list of incentives. You will not have to pay taxes. So what I've learned from Greg over time, and he can expand upon, is, guess what? Warren Buffett provides way more value to the economy than his secretary does. His secretary helps him with some administrative work, and she gets paid accordingly to do so. Warren Buffett employs a ton of people. He owns a lot of assets, a lot of real estate, in which houses people. So he houses people, he owns assets, he has investments, and he employs people. So 2 things I've learned, from Greg and through just building financial literacy is, flip the script on the tax code, invest in assets. Maybe it's owning real estate, employ people, start businesses are 2 great ways. So could you kind of expand upon that Warren Buffett story?
Yeah, certainly. So, like Wade said, like, it's not necessarily a right or wrong thing, because people have opinions on that, right? Like, is it right that Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, these people don't pay a lot in taxes? Well, that's not for me to judge, right? But I know what the laws say, and the laws say that they don't have to. So that's how it's set up right now, right? There's a famous quote out there from a judge in a tax court case, and he said, as an American, you are not obligated to pay $1 more in taxes than you're required to, right? And then, I'm going to read a quote here that I have read on my website. It says, my attitude when I was at the service, meaning the Internal Revenue Service, was I wanted taxpayers to pay not more than what they owe, but what they owe. And this is the same thing. And listen to this part. Shame on you if you're paying more than what you owe. Typically speaking, big businesses take everything they're entitled to, but the smaller guys are not looking for some of the things that they're entitled to, because frankly, the laws written into Congress were not for them. So the big, and that guy's name was Mark Everson, former commissioner of the IRS, which means he was the man in charge of the IRS under George Bush. And what I took from that was that, everyone's, oh, IRS, big, scary, agency, right? But this guy who was leading it was saying, look, I want to be friendly to taxpayers. They don't need to pay more than what they owe. And there's a government accountability report from years ago that, people overpay taxes by like $80 billion a year, right? Because the government has an idea of what's out there as incentives, and they're not going to say, hey, Wade, did you know you could have taken that tax credit? No, they're not going to say that, right? They're going to come the other way, but they're not going to tell you what you could have done. So, right or wrong, that is how the system is set up now. And I think that people need to take full advantage of the system as it is. And it changes a lot too. So it's going to be changing in the next couple of years with a new regime coming in. But yeah, I mean, I think certainly the larger businesses like, the Berkshire Hathaway in Warren Buffett's case, or Amazon, they're contributing in other ways to the economy, right? So one thing, there that Wade said that really stood out and that I'm a big believer in is, if you own assets, and that doesn't matter what type of asset it is, you're going to pay less taxes, right? The government wants you to own assets. Assets can be a business, it can be investment real estate, it can be stocks, aka capital gains, lower tax. They want you to own assets, right? That is where you're going to have the tax incentives. Now, the traditional mindset, this is not right or wrong, but this is what the traditional mindset has been, is that you work at the job and you buy the house. Some people will tell you that a house is actually a liability, right? Because it's not adding, necessarily adding income to your life, cash flow to your life. Now, there's an argument that, it should appreciate over the long term and you store value in it. So, that's definitely valid. But there's an alternative mindset out there, right? That you should be looking to acquire assets because not only do they grow, they produce cash flow, they produce long term income, but they also reduce your taxes big time. Yeah, and real estate's a great example. I mean, again, if real estate's structured properly, do it right, you have the right people on your team, there's a good chance you're going to pay zero taxes ever. And I'm serious by that. Now, people I know when President Trump's taxes came out and whatever, maybe before the election or sometime, the people are shocked, like, oh wow, like how does he have all these losses and he doesn't pay taxes? Like to me, the CPA community, we were laughing about that actually because it's actually not that complex. What he was doing, he's using something called bonus depreciation and net operating loss carrybacks. And again, it's in the tax code for the person that owns $100,000 worth of real estate to use, right? And he happened to have a lot bigger of a portfolio. So these things are out there. And obviously, someone like Bezos or, someone from Apple, like they have armies of lawyers and tax attorneys and CPAs and accountants and people on their side to do this stuff. So I've always thought, it goes back to my whole theory is that you have to have the specialized knowledge, but what is stopping other CPAs, right, from getting the specialized knowledge and bringing this down to the common man business owner, right? There's nothing stopping anybody. It's just pure education. It's out there for all of us to get, all of us to have, right? There's no code on the tax code that I have to secret society to get into. It's there for the taking. And it's about, like Sandy said, it's you got to be a student of the game, figure these things out. Like Wade said, is buy assets, right? That's, it's not a trick, right? It's just kind of how it is. And then it's going to unlock these other incentives that are out there for you for the taking.
So what I gained from that is you have a duty as a US citizen to pay your fair share of taxes. Everyone knows that and believes that. But then, okay, what is your fair share? Well, guess what? The IRS, everyone is saying your fair share is just what you're required to pay. And you are not required or shouldn't be paying anything over that. All big businesses, they've got CPAs, they've got professionals in place where they pay what they're required to pay. They pay their fair share. Small business owners oftentimes don't have that sophistication or financial literacy or a CPA on their side. So they pay more than their fair share. So it is so valuable what we found in our life and why we wanted to bring Greg on and introduce our financial SWAT team to people. It's because at the end of the day, money isn't everything, but it's right up there with oxygen. Like it enables us to live the life we want to live. It is a thing in our society. And so what can you do if you saved more money on your taxes? Would that be an extra family vacation? Would it be reinvesting into your business to grow? Would it be giving back? Whatever that looks like, that's your duty to just pay your fair share of taxes. And so then in transitioning, having a CPA, having someone on your side is so important to us and something we wanted to share, with our community. So for you, Greg, and GO CPA, just coming back to touching base on when it makes sense for a business owner to work with a CPA and who you guys at GO CPA work with.
Yeah. So as far as who should be working with the CPA, again, I think when you're an established business, right? Again, when I say established, I don't mean that you have 10 employees. I mean that you're doing it full time. You have income, and when I say income, I mean your revenue is greater than your expenses, right? So you have a tax, right? Because when you're first starting out, people may not be making money; they just have expenses, so they're losing money. You can use that to your advantage, of course, but we're usually looking at people that are paying taxes, right? That's where CPA is going to help you when you have a obligation to pay taxes, and they're growing, right? You're kind of if I would say if your percentage of taxes is growing to 20% or more, yeah, I think a CPA can probably help you, right? But if you're only paying 10%, 12%, maybe not worth it. I can't say, guarantee, but maybe not worth it at that point. And as far as who we're working with, we're really focused on a couple groups. And one is, business owners that it doesn't matter again how big their base is, right? But that are profitable, right? They're making multiple six figures. They have, which means they probably have a large tax liability, because that's where we can give some of these more advanced strategies that are going to actually drive down that tax bill every year. And if they have, other obligations, we're going to help them on their accounting and their bookkeeping, their financials, things like that. And I think that, again, it's an amazing thing, because you talk to people in all these different situations. I mean, I spoke to a guy this morning that is an immigrant from France, living in Boca down in Florida, and like really successful business. And just like just listening to that journey, right, really inspired me. Came over here and he's built something from the ground up, hasn't taken $1 from a bank or an investor, and has this very successful company. So when I see that, and then I see, how can I help them? Like, it really inspires us to, hey, how can we? There has to be something here, right? It's like a big puzzle for me, and that's what we kind of we call it like a diagnosis when we go through this, looking at it from like a doctor's perspective, right? Like, how do we diagnose their problems here? And sometimes that may not be problems. It's how do you optimize their situation, and that's what really kind of drives us and keeps it fun for us. Is right, like, oh, hey, we can do this trick right here. That's going to save them 5K, 10K, whatever it is. So we're really looking for the people that are making a little bit more money at this point. Sometimes it's people with large real estate portfolios, right? They're great to work with because there's so much in the tax code for them. But in closing, I do recommend people that they have a business, as they start paying taxes and they start paying more taxes because their income's growing, it's definitely time to have a conversation. And you may find that, hey, you know what, like, CPA I talked to, they may not be right for me this time, or maybe maybe it's just a consultation, you get some information, and keep it in mind for the future. But I think just knowing that when you grow, there is a better way, right? There is a better way. Don't always think that, like, oh, hey, there's a old adage out there in the CPA world, which is the worst advice. And I was on another podcast with Nexus podcast, Dr. Daniel, who Wade knows, and he said, "What's the worst piece of advice you've ever heard?" And I said, "It's a CPA who says, if you want to pay less taxes, make less money." Like, horrible advice, horrible advice. Or they'll say, just buy a car. So yeah, I think that as you grow, just keep it in mind, right? There are cool planning techniques out there. There's long term things out there, right, for wealth transfer between generations that can be done. So just keep an open mind to everything, right? And just know that there is help out there.
I love this. This has been great. I love that you think of it as a puzzle and it's like a challenge to you, and you like the way you come at it, I think, is so unique. So first of all, I need to call Wade out for not giving Rita Davenport credit on.
Oh my gosh. Sorry, Rita.
Yeah. He's like, money's right up there with, like, money's not everything, but it's right up there with oxygen. Like, you did not come up with that incredible quote.
She was extremely energetic. Yes.
I love her.
Yeah, she was great.
So, okay, just to high level overview. So you can help people set up their entities. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we do
Okay.
that all the time. Whether it's one person set up an LLC, or it's two people forming together to create a partnership, which is more complex, or it's someone that's, hey, we're going to start a corporation because we plan on, raising money from other investors. So all those situations, we're very versed in, and we, doing it on a daily basis.
Awesome. Yes. Because you've helped us set up our LLCs. And that was, I remember being so confused because we're an LLC, but we file as an S Corp, which I was like, what does that even mean? Okay. So you help people set up entities. You guys do bookkeeping. You guys do tax planning. You do CPA like services. What else am I missing?
Those are definitely the core services. So like, our three core services are the tax planning, we call it virtual accounting, virtual CFO, and then we call entity and asset protection. So figuring out the right business model for you, and how do we structure that and protect that properly. So those are our three core services. Occasionally we're doing some other consultation type work and stuff like that, but that's really the engine that drives us.
And I know Greg, in working with us, because we've worked with Greg, they go beyond. Like, if I were helping someone start a business or get healthy, I would want to know what they want, what their goals are, and why they want them. So Greg goes into this in detail, and his team, and they understand what your current financial position is, where you want to be, and why you want to be there. And it goes beyond, like Greg said, those historical records and filing taxes, but then proactively looking into the future. How can we set up your life, your businesses, all these things to grow to where you want to grow? What are maybe some investments? Not that he's an investment advisor, but like things that I think you could do to help you get to where you want to go. So it's so much more than just a tax return or just filing your taxes.
Yeah. And certainly I think that, like you said, we're definitely not investment advisors, But, when clients will ask, what should we be doing? I'm not going to say, hey, definitely go do this, but I say you might want to explore these areas more, right? Like I like to understand what their end goal is. And I always say, hey, we're planning with the end in mind here, right? Like everyone has an end. And it might be my end is I'm going to grow this business and run it for 30 years and make a ton of money. That's great. Some other people will come to me and say, I want to grow this business and sell it to Google in 4 years, right? Drastically different situations we're going to work with there. So I always start at the end and work backwards. And the one of the the key things I think we do when you said investment, it rang a bell is we look at ourselves really as a quarterback of your kind of your financial process, right? So yeah, we're not going to be able to maybe do a certain thing for you, right? That a lawyer needs to do, right? But we have our legal partner. And maybe there's some insurance type of thing you do, right? But we have an insurance partner. So we look at it ourselves as almost a hub and spoke model, and we're that center of that model. And we
One
have
stop shop, baby.
one stop shop, right? We have those experts, right? Best in class experts that I personally do business with myself, right? I'm putting my money, my trust, my legal documents in these people's hands. I really do trust them. And I'm only going to refer clients to them that I believe need those services, right? So that's really how I think about it. That, hey, yeah, yes, we're not investment advisors, we're not lawyers, we're not insurance people, but I know, my team and I know enough about that stuff to know when that situation comes up. Boom, we know exactly, who you need to talk to, right? We get the best person here that we trust to bring you to. So it's definitely your financial situation is quite complex in life, and you can keep it simple or you can get really complex, right? That's up to you and how much return you want to get on your investment in different professionals and different products that are out there.
I love how passionate you are about this. Like you just get lit up. It's so good. So fire round before we wrap up for people to know how to get in contact with you, because I know there's a lot of people listening right now that are like, I need Greg in my life yesterday. So first of all, what's your favorite book?
This is probably cliched, and everyone on this podcast said this, but it's probably Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki. Definitely one of those people, consider a mentor. I'd love to meet him because I think he just looks at things so differently. He's not a tax person, but his tax mindset's the same as mine. So a lot of my clients read that as well, and they're like, "Wow, this guy really is really kind of got me into this mindset, right?" And it's funny because there's like in my mind, there's two groups of people out there. There's the Kiyosaki group and there's the Dave Ramsey group, like drastically different mindsets on how you should be doing finances. And people may not know who they are, but if you look into both of them, like they both extremely successful people, but did it different ways and teach different methods. So yeah, Robert's my guy. So that's definitely probably my favorite book.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki. We'll drop it in the show notes. That is my ultimate all-time favorite financial book as far as building your financial literacy, understanding finances from a place they don't teach in school or you don't learn growing up, but how to build wealth.
I love that. I remember we did a book club on that book recently, and one of my biggest takeaways from it was there's a difference between being broke and poor. Broke is temporary. We've all been broke before in life, but poor is a mindset. And if you're poor, like you'll always be in that mindset. I remember reading that and being like, whoa. Okay. So in wrapping up, Greg, you're a handsome guy. You're super successful. You have so much going for you. You're living in downtown Boston. Like, I just have to ask, because I feel like 80% of our listeners are women.
Hey, I don't know about that.
I think maybe, but are you single?
I am a bachelor. Yes, I am.
He's on the market.
I had to hit you
with that said, where can we connect with you? No, maybe on the single front, that's a different front, but professionally, where can we connect with you?
Let's not do those inquiries through the website, but so the best way to get in contact, the website is gotaxplanning.com. And we have a special landing page here. So if listeners of the show want to get, a free, what we call a white paper, right? That's for really just tips and tricks for people that are early on in their business journey. You can go to gotaxplanning.com/getting magnetic, gotaxplanning.com/getting magnetic. And there'll be a download form there, right? No obligation. Just read it, see what you think. Just has some, cool tips and tricks that you can probably do yourself. So that's the best way to get in contact with us.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thank you, Greg.
So grateful to have you here on Getting Magnetic. This is definitely like a different tune than we normally have, but I think it adds a lot of value, and a lot of people don't know really much about this at all. So I know this was a lot of good nuggets in here. So thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you, Greg.
I enjoyed doing it. And hope to be back again soon.
All right,
Yes.
brother. Have a great rest of your day.
Take care, guys.
We really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Wade and I have learned throughout our journey that delegating is just a big part of getting magnetic towards the life that you want. And Wade and I are not skilled in taxes. And so that was something that we outsourced. And so we're just really grateful to be able to share this resource with you. And
I think overall, like our message on getting magnetic is getting magnetic to that life you want. Like Sandy said, whether that's through vitality and health and wellness, or flourishing in your relationships, or growing and flourishing in your business and the entrepreneurship journey, all of those things. And a part of overall wellness, overall thriving in your life is financial wellness. Like at the end of the day, it is. So we can't ignore it. We have to focus on it. And like Sandy said, it's okay if you don't know everything. We don't either, but that's where you do delegate, you hire professionals. So glad we were able to bring Greg on and just let him drop some value bombs on things that, technically we don't know about either. And that's why, we hire help and we have people help us. I think if you have a dream life, you got to build a team, and you build a team around you of people that can help you get to where you want to go. Greg is one of those people for us. He's a part of our financial SWAT team, in which we have a Freestyle Friday coming up where we're going to continue this conversation on money mindset. And next week, stay tuned, because we're going to transition from, getting your books, your records right, getting your business set up the right way, pay the least amount you need to in taxes. Then from there, what do I do with the extra? How do I think about starting to invest? How do I start to think about building a legacy, building generational wealth beyond myself? So super excited for next week. We're going to start transitioning into what to do with my money. We shouldn't just be spending it all, but excited for that.
And remember, if you're loving what you're hearing here on Getting Magnetic, share it with a friend. Who do you know that's an entrepreneur? Who do you know that owns a business or that's starting a business? Share this episode with them. It would mean so much to us to have you subscribe, rate, review, all the things. And we'll see you on Friday as Wade and I dive deeper into what we do with our finances.
Only those that can see the invisible can do the impossible.
So remember, you are magnetic.